Good morning and welcome to the Unitarian Church of Fall River. The theme of this morning's service is religion and technology, or you might say more broadly, technology and our humanity. And there will be an unscheduled but brief reading about the nature of information. That's the kind of problem that physicists are in disagreement about, don't even like to think about, as they don't like to think about foundational problems in general, such as what is the reality that quantum physics is describing, preferring the much easier path of saying, don't worry about it, shut up and compute. We won't get into the measurement problem, and we won't solve the problem of what is information this morning. But we will get a feel for a variety of ways in which technology, and in particular aspects of the internet with which you are familiar, impact us. Although we're going to go back to the very beginnings of our interaction with technology back into the Wild West of the 80s. Are there any announcements?
Course of Miracles continues to be a miracle. We are to 400 regular followers worldwide, 35 countries worldwide, including the Dominican Republic.
Good morning, Rob. Thank you so much for joining us today. I know this is the last service of the year for us, but we're in touch with you to share some things for next year. And I was letting her know that Lisa First is joining us next week. She's been with us for several years as well, and we want to come to her. Thank you.
Perhaps one more announcement from myself that this wristband representing the blue sky and gold fields, poppy fields, sunflower fields of Ukraine, if there are ways in which the congregation or you as individuals can support the brave soldiers who are fighting for their freedom, I encourage you to do so. I don't know if there is a Ukrainian population in Fall River, but there is in Massachusetts, and so to begin our service, I'll light our chalice. You need to check your connections. Sorry. Yes, I'm dangerous. The flame that we light at the beginning of each service is a flame that burns brightly in each of us and binds us together as a single family, a loving family that has compassion for all who are around us, no matter where we are. Our first hymn is number 345. With joy, we claim the growing light. With joy we claim the growing light, advancing thought and widening view. The larger freedom, clearer sight, from which the old unfold anew. Wider view, come loftier thought, with fuller wide and good to see. Freedom, truer self-control, knowledge deeper reverence deep. Let us share our covenant with one another. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest of truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve humanity in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant with each other and with our God. Let us join in prayer. As we share our joys and concerns and sorrows with one another, we welcome into our awareness the presence of others unable to be here with us. They're with us here in spirit. We welcome them. We allow them to enter our consciousness as they make themselves known to us. We speak for them to one another. We speak to one another. Even in this time of continuing pandemic, we do have the joy and the opportunity to see one another face to face. Are there joys or concerns you would like to share this morning?
Well, I'm really happy to talk about technology today. I just got a new cell phone. A week ago, I thought we got the latest from Android technology. Of course, you're coming over to the dark side. And I thought it was struggle, so thank you.
Think of all the marketing opportunities you've just given the purveyors of technology. Watch your every move. Yes.
Nancy and I were able to worship at another place yesterday afternoon. This was the Nick and Neve's Tavern in Providence. It's the first time time we'd seen live music, and couldn't tell you how long. Walter, as part of Dave, with the choir. It was a communion service. Everything from hymns to you name it. It was actually quite a mature crowd. We were happy with that. So, all in all, it was a wonderful experience. Thank you, Walter and Beth, for doing all that. Thank you.
Thanks. At this time, we have the opportunity to become quiet and enter into our own silent meditation. It'll conclude with our singing Spirit of Life. So, unannounced presentation. What exactly is information? In classical physics, matter is any substance that has mass and takes up space, that has volume. And I said I would introduce you to this problem that besets physicists when they think about it or get prodded by philosophers. In 1961, MIT's Norbert Wiener, mathematician, he is responsible really for the development of the science of cybernetics and early phases of artificial intelligence, said, information's information, it's not matter or energy. 1991, Ralph Landauer, who was a German-American physicist, he had a lot to do with thermodynamics, information processing, and condensed matter physics, declared that information is physical matter, that it's not an abstract entity, but exists only through physical representation. It's always encoded in a physical medium. And so physicists themselves are divided on this, but by and large like to see information as physical, as a fundamental component of the physical world. And some of the reasons they give are these. First of all, that from Landauer, that the creation of information takes work, and its erasure generates heat. And so that contributes to the increase of entropy. And understanding it in this way, then, information is a physical quantity. It's conserved. It can be neither created nor destroyed. an aspect of the problem that plagued Hawking when he was thinking about black holes. We won't go into that. But a second reason is that at the most fundamental level of reality, the quantum level of subatomic particles, information, that reality is informational. They even think of the universe as kind of a giant quantum computer. And the third reason is that physical laws can be recast in informational terms. The physicist John Wheeler declared that information, in fact, is the primary physical entity from which our physical reality is built. That entails every physical process can be described in terms of interactions between particles that produce binary answers, yes, no, here or there, just as they do in a digital computer. But if you ask what information is, to ourselves as our common understanding, I think is really that it's something different from physical matter. It is an abstraction. It's a pattern, perhaps, of physical matter, but not the physical matter itself. So in contrast to thinking that information is physical and always conserved, we think information can be lost. And as an example, you burn the only existing copy of a book. That information is lost. But many physicists want us to, in some way, equate information and matter. Physical systems should be thought of as kind of catalogs of information. In fact, from the start, every piece of the universe was processing information. And that's how you explain the universe. But those who reject the idea of information as physical, it's a long history that goes back to Plato, essentially pointing out that information can be associated with physical entropy, but that when you do, you're speaking metaphorically, that information is about something, and so it makes no sense to say the world just is information. This is sometimes cast as the problem of the reality of universals. Now, I said I would present you this problem, just enough to get you to worry about it, to have it make you feel uncomfortable. And I've just made you all philosophers, because that's where they begin. They feel uncomfortable. Well, our hymn is number 301, Touch the Earth, Reach the Sky. Touch the earth, reach the sky, walk on shores while spirits fly, over the ocean, over the land. Our faith is a quest to understand. Touch the earth, reach the sky. Children ask the reasons why. In our lives the answers show, and by our love they learn and grow. Touch the earth, reach the sky. All are born and all shall die. Life's the time left in between to follow a star, a dream. Touch the earth, reach the sky, hug the laughter, feel the cry. May we see where we can give, for this is what it means to live. Touch the earth, reach the sky, soar with courage ever. fly, to touch the earth and reach the sky. At this time, we welcome your gifts for the good works of this congregation. If you haven't thought about the implication already, one way of worrying about the problem of information is that if we are embracing ourselves as bits of information, are we therefore nothing more than physical? And if you think that the tradition of physicalism in philosophy prevails, you should read some recent thoughts by David Chalmers. So back in 1995, Nicholas Negroponte was a computer theorist. He was a Greek American. He was an architect. He was chairman of MIT's Media Lab. He founded the One Laptop per Child Association and wrote a book called Being Digital, in which he urged that we should embrace our status as information bits rather than atoms of matter. He may be coming at this from a different angle. So suppose we think about what that might mean. That if we are information bits, one way of thinking about it might mean giving us a kind of immortality, because after all, if we're no longer atoms of matter, but instead bits of information, we could have become a reproducible pattern, a potentially eternally existing reproducible pattern that can be stored anywhere on any suitable device, like a computer, on your cell phone, a pattern to be called up at will, subject to endless repetition. And then perhaps we could create multiple instances of ourselves or our dogs. Imagine a Buddy or a Princess or Oscar or Poppy or my Rufus instantiated on every laptop in the land. Of course, being bits of information, we could not pet our dog. We could look at pictures of them, but wait a minute, now how could we look Bits of information cannot see. They have no eyes, which are material. Eyes are made of matter. Well, as bits of information, could we reproduce? Maybe by computer cloning, we'd kind of copy and paste our patterns. There wouldn't be any biological reproduction. So what's the fun in that? Technology giveth, technology taketh away. Negroponte's invitation to become one with our technology is kind of like entering this love-hate relationship, because on the one hand, we're told by technology vendors like Microsoft, Apple, Google, and social media platforms like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, that technology makes our lives better, puts us in communication with one another all over the globe. But then exactly what is that communication? Well, vendors of social media platforms assert that the internet brings us this new classless society, this new world of immediate pleasure. We upload videos from the smartphones they made. Now we have this new universal nonverbal language of all things that are worth observing. Now, don't get me wrong on the internet, because I actually was using the internet way back in the 80s, except then it was called the DARPANET. DARPANET is an acronym that stands for the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency of the US Department of Defense, that enabled me to communicate with faculty at universities like Carnegie Mellon and Stanford and UCal San Diego. Caltech too, for that matter. So the internet is a repository of enormous information. You can watch The God of the Dobro, Jerry Douglas, play on YouTube. You can see dogs do funny things. You can look at old film and photographs of what San Francisco was like before the earthquake. I actually have nothing against YouTube. But on the internet, we also leave behind the world where flesh and blood stories about people's lives reside. Instead, we seem to enter a world where persons are dissolved into virtual persons. Can we really share our natures with one another or fashion a new morality, especially when the hate, the very hate we need to overcome, is present on the internet, now only masked by the anonymity of the hate mongers? And I have to say that I miss those long, private person-to-person conversations over these copper-wired connections called telephones. You may remember, they're always in town, even before you had your own in town, there always used to be a big department store with this nice wooden booth, and you could go into the booth and close the door and it would be quiet, and you could spend hours talking to somebody in your little booth. Two-way conversation in what's called full duplex, which means two voices can talk at the same time, freely express their inner lives. So I'm not quite ready to replace that directness with visual simulations from Snapchat and Instagram, because those aren't really duplex, full duplex conversations. They're just serial monologues. You're really talking into space. I want real selves, not selfies. So with all its potential, has the internet cost us something very profound? By embracing the idea that we are bits of information, we alienate ourselves from our actual voices and our actual bodies. Is being digitally connected the connection of human meaning, or is it illusory? in the digital world where we discover we may be more alone than ever. But I want to share a couple stories with you of what the early days in computing were like. And the first will give you a sense of just how much like the Wild West it was, with technological innovation and human values and ethics all in competition with one another right from the start. Now everybody's worried about hacking. Well, this is what it was like back then. Because the CDC didn't always mean the Center for Disease Control in Atlanta. It also stood for something called the Cult of the Dead Cow, which was this loosely organized group of computer hackers based out of Lubbock, Texas, and San Francisco's Demon Roach Underground. It was founded in 1984, and it was the oldest, most respected, and most feared hacking group in the computer underground. They took their pride in the ability to break into any system, anywhere, anytime. Computer security, encryption software, for them, child's play. And they put out these updates. This was their global domination update number 4. And it sneered, "Yeah, you found us. Now what are you going to do about it, rodent? You have never seen us, but you may have felt our wrath." That had color in those days. We operate in the bitter darkness outside known channels. We thrive in the ferro-concrete walls of technological civilization. We are the stainless steel rats gnawing at the underpinnings of the information superhighway, spreading the power and propaganda of the cow wherever we go. Great, you say? But have we ever disrupted communications on 2 continents by moving telecommunications satellites? Hacked computing resources belonging to the 3-letter agency, that's the CIA, and the Pentagon, yep. Altered environmental controls in local factories, done that. But unlike other hacker groups, we've never been caught. We intend to dominate and subvert the media wherever possible. Information is a virus, yet another way to think about it. And we intend to infect all of you. There is no vaccine. There is no escape. There is no hope. There is only CDC. So behold the cultural jihad. And then they topped it off with a quote from the proto-Unitarians that we like to claim, Thomas Jefferson. Those who desire to give up freedom in order to gain security will not have, nor do they deserve, either one. So the members of this hacker group included the founder, one under the name of Swamp Rat, another Suicidal Amoeba, Tequila Willie, Weasel Boy. Death Veggie posted instructions for building a bomb. But this was not a hacker group without a moral code, because the CDC also served as advisors to another group, the Hong Kong Blondes. These were Chinese computer scientists and human rights activists who were using the internet against the oppression of the Chinese Communist government. So that gives you a little feel for what the early Wild West of computing was like. But the ethical and the design issues about how people interact with computer systems remains essentially the same. I gave a number of papers at some international conferences back in the 80s on not just the ethics of the internet, but the ethical dilemmas involved in how software itself is designed, often being designed by multiple hands, multiple groups, and going through iteration after iteration, which makes tracing its source, those who are responsible for it, particularly difficult. Well, a touchscreen user interface, which you all now enjoy, was a bad idea in the 1980s. It's still a hacker's wet dream. So enjoy your touchscreen. But how does our interaction with computer systems affect us? How does it affect human behavior? So this is actually a true story. But I'll preface it by saying there's a design principle that engineers use when they're thinking about the interface between computers as systems and human beings. And the principle holds that when people interact with machines through language, they behave as if the rules for person-to-person communication apply to person-to-machine communication, that computer sessions are like conversations. But are they? Are they real two-way conversations where people are trying to cooperate with one another, collaborate with one another? Or are they fake conversations? Well, here's the story. There was an early AI, early artificial intelligence program written 40 or 50 years ago called Doctor. And it was a simple question and answer type of system that the Doctor program and acted like a kind of client-centered psychotherapist, Rogerian psychotherapy. If you don't know what it means, it's the kind where when you say something, the therapist gives you a knowing nod or says, uh-huh, or paraphrases and repeats what you've said, So now I said this was old, and in fact, in those days, you didn't even have a computer with a screen. You had something called a teletype, which was kind of like a typewriter. And you would type in a command or request, and the computer would print back its response on the paper in the teletype machine. So with the Doctor program, remember it's acting like a Rogerian psychotherapist, you type in a question such as, I hate my job. Or, why do I hate my job? And the Doctor program would come back, yes, tell me more. And why do you hate your job? So one Saturday morning, this vice president at BB&N, that's Bolt, Beranek, and Newman, it was a acoustic research house in Cambridge, arrived at the computer room, and he had the intent of using the PDP-1, which tells you how old it is, PDP-1 computer for a demonstration. And on the teletype, he found this following message, which said, type all messages into this teletype and end them with a period. Now, the note had been put there by a programmer who had just succeeded in making the Doctor program run. But the vice president thought that the note was from a researcher who often accessed the computer from home. And so the vice president carried on this following conversation with the Doctor program. Vice President, do you think I can use the computer this morning? Teletype. Why do you ask? Vice President, I might be able to make some additional telecom sales. Teletype. Why, aren't you sure? Vice President, my prospective customers have never seen a demonstration of the system. Teletype. Does this mean very much to you? Vice President, of course it does. Teletype. You seem very positive about that. Vice President, this is ridiculous. Teletype. What do you mean, this is ridiculous? Vice President, is there any reason why I can't use the computer now? Teletype, tell me more about your prospective customers. Well, the Vice President was now beginning to get frustrated and angry, and he typed in, please dial me up at 491-1850. But the Vice President forgot to leave the period at the end. And so the program was just sitting there, waiting for more input, and the computer didn't answer his request. Now convinced that the researcher was playing games with him, the Vice President called up the researcher, woke him up, and angrily asked, why are you being so snotty to me? And the researcher, quite taken by surprise, replied, what do you mean? Why am I being so snotty to you? It took the researcher quite a while to convince the Vice President that he had been talking to a computer program all along and not to a person. But here's something even more shocking, because it was proposed by many actual psychotherapists, mostly the ones in California, that programs like the doctor program should actually be used in conducting therapy. So it seems that what we've learned is that it does not matter. There is no human understanding of the client's expression of need. It does not matter. There is no human acknowledgement of another person's pain. We can give imitation understanding, virtual acknowledgement from a virtual person. It's all the same. But of course, it's not the same. So how then does this technology impact human behavior and values? What are the ethical issues it raises for us? I suggest it raises questions about how we shape the kind of person we are, questions about our responsibility for conveying meaning. These reflections about how people communicate with one another are also about the relationship between technology and religion, because we're asking, how does technology impact who we are, what kind of being we are, what is the basis of our humanity? And that, I suggest, is a question that concerns our spirituality. Religion historically was formed out of the ancient world, expressing itself in myth or images from nature, like the mountain storm symbolizing God when Moses ascended Sinai to receive the tablets. Technology, on the other hand, is a moving present, kind of racing to the future, expressing itself not in myth, but in formula or code. And I'm not talking about programming languages here, but the kind of code that we humans have come to use, from abbreviations like LOL or IMHO to hashtags and tweets and retweets and trolls and lurkers and fails and photobombs and face palms to the cute little cartoon emojis we now use to express all conceivable human emotions. Technology is about change, and so that change includes ourselves, that we, our human nature, are potential objects of change by technology. With our gaze ever increasingly drawn to the colorful glow of smartphone screens like moths to flames, our adventures are not real, they're vicarious. Our lives are taking place in virtual reality. There is an abundance of ethical issues that deal with our use of computer technology, like freedom of information versus privacy, something that should concern all users of Facebook, which captures and then sells and markets vast personal information gathered about you unknowingly. Where do you search on the internet? What your every keystroke or taps on the screen tells them a piece of information, a bit of information. You are bits of information, and organizations like Facebook are using it for profit. But the issue that in a way concerns me the most is the impact of technology on human behavior itself. The internet is filled with great possibilities, one of which studies show is its use measurably contributes to increased loneliness and depression. So what kind of behavior do we want the use of technology to reinforce? We create technology. Technology changes who we are, which forces on us now the question, what kind of people do we want to become? So I'm in a way leaving us again with more answers or more questions than answers. But let me conclude with these thoughts. We've created computers with mechanistic-like intelligence and behavior. And it's become increasingly clear, and this was the subject of a number of my papers, that computers in fact alter the thinking and the behavior of their users, which is what it means is that computer systems can produce mechanistic-like intelligence and behavior in us. Computers can create human automata, beings, living beings whose thinking imitates the decision processes of computer programs. The most basic use of computers is to manipulate quantitative data. Computers are number crunchers. The values of those numbers have no meaning for the computer. But humans are adapters. Humans are good learners, learning how to use a lot of really lousily designed user interfaces is one example. But given how good at learning we humans are, should it then surprise us that we can acquire behavior that imitates the patterns of computer systems with all its repetitiveness, narrowness, qualitative flatness? We can learn, in short, to become automata, which is where our faith, our spiritual lives then become so important, because it is here that we learn what it really means to communicate with one another. It is here we reinforce the values of our humanity in the manner that is exemplified in this church, this congregation, where we create an emotional sanctuary where everyone freely searches their own personal religious meaning in an accepting company of others who are themselves also engaged in a similar search for meaning. The claim of this church is that the shared search with others can restore meaning to our humanity, a humanity that can all too easily be taken away. So technology can perhaps help create humanity as well as take it away if we control it. We also see that true humanity requires a restoration of the recognition that the inherent worth and dignity of every place, every person, is a place of the spirit. That is the place of the human spirit, and it's a place, at least, to begin, as in those who are gathered here this morning. So our last hymn is number 331, Life is the Greatest Gift of All. Creatures great and small, of high and low, So treasure it and measure it with deeds of shining worth. Mine is the brightest gift of all. We are a light which shining gift of measure. From the dust our temples lift, our vision soars. For seed and fruit, for flower and fruit, our grateful spirit. Remember, as we go forward from this Sunday, that it is still at times necessary to not only practice good hygiene, but to be compassionate of others as they deal with the hopefully last stages of this pandemic. And to remember that when you do go out in peace, let's be careful out there. You have your choral amen, which I always love to hear.